Hello, friends. Welcome to today's episode of the me-titled Jason Nellis Show. Shockingly, amazingly, surreptitiously, I am your host, Jason Nellis. Today, I am here with the wonderful, brilliant, talented, and may I just say, phenomenal Jennifer Kretchmer. Jen, you may know from her work on Children of Arete. She has been part of the Dungeons & Dragons community for many, many years. We're also old college friends. We've been to San Diego Comic-Con together. And if you're looking for somebody on all of the dirt on me, I'm probably talking to the right person. Hi, Jen. It's good to see you.
Hi, it's really good to see you. Thank you so much for having me. Also, I need to just record that, have that as a ringtone everywhere I go.
You can have it. I'll send it to you right after this. Oh, stop. Well, one thing I didn't mention that we will be talking about today, of course, is in addition to all of your phenomenal work, here in LA and doing entertainment specifically related to Dungeons and Dragons, you are a disability awareness advocate. You yourself are disabled. There's lots of parts of that world that I think listeners will be really interested in. And of course, any terrible stories you have about me, I'm sure that they're very excited about too. So we got a lot to cover, but I don't want to make this all about me. Let's make it more about me. No,
well, right. Let's see. We'll see.
Yeah.
I do remember a certain casino night in college.
Oof, yeah. Well, there was a time in college, I think it's probably worth starting with, where I was even less cool than I am now, which I realize most people are going to think I'm at the bottom of the barrel as both a dad and a husband. But let me tell you, kids, there was a time when the gray was a little less in my hair that I was somehow less cool. And Jen, I feel like you were witness to a lot of that.
But I was also substantially less cool. I mean, my career's in Dungeons and Dragons, so I don't know what.
Let's talk a little bit about that first, because I think one thing that's always interesting to me is, you and I come from backgrounds of very nerdy things, comic books, films, Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering type stuff, things that sit in that sort of like nerd, geek, dork overlap that I know a lot of people have spent a lot of time over conceptualizing. Can you talk me through a little bit sort of your transition from the work you were doing when, you and I were in college and after in the world of, arts and entertainment and acting, and how you ended up attracted to and making Dungeons and Dragons your full-time work?
Yeah. So I've been playing tabletop games for more than 20 years now. I started in high school and continued through college, continued after college. And it was always an interest of mine, a hobby of mine, and something where there weren't a lot of people like me publicly talking about the game. And mostly I just wanted to geek out with people about it. I've almost always worked in male-dominated industries. That's just how my career has shaken out from the time I was, 14 and working in magic. That I've been very comfortable in those worlds. And so I'm also used to being kind of the only one in the room talking about this. And I wasn't the only one from, marginalized genders or from the disabled community or, any of a number of different marginalized groups who were starting to find each other online. But we certainly weren't the default when people thought about tabletop games. The type of D&D game I had played, because I had learned to play from theater nerds, was always a very cinematic theatrical game where we did a lot of voices and character performance. It was like a group improv jam every week, but in a fantasy world. And to this day, I still do think D&D in many ways is like long-form improv. You are telling a long-form improvised story within certain agreed-upon rules, but that's the case when you do improv too. So there are a lot of parallels to storytelling, and that part of my career, the acting work I did, theater major stuff, I ended up graduating as an English major. So the literary structure, storytelling, narrative structure, those all came into play as you design campaigns, adventures, especially as I started writing for D&D and for other publishers. That was more and more important. But so many things in my life have come because I refuse to decide what I want to do when I grow up. I just kind of follow whatever's interesting to me and take the other stuff along. And
I
I
mean,
think
I
this
think that's
was
something that we all admire about you. I mean, the fact is
that I
that you
refused
have, well,
to.
you have, as long as I've known you, and I think that, you know, if there are listeners out there who are familiar with your career, one of the things I've always admired about you is your willingness to adjust, roll with the punches, figure out how and where you can find the most creatively satisfying work while not sacrificing what your long-term goal, namely that you want to be in a creative space and you want to be building creative worlds for people, be that on television, web, film, etc.
And I think one of the other things that distinguished me at that time was I was working primarily as in television and TV production, especially by the time I started doing a lot of work in the tabletop space. And I had seen both as an actor and as a producer and on the production side, the difference in evolving industries between people getting paid and not, people having organizations that support them and advocate for their work and not. Those are things that I think when you work in industries that are hobbies, that are things you're passionate about and love, that are creatively fulfilling, often people will do those jobs without that piece of it. You'll work for free, you'll work for low rates. And that's because often it's a hobby, it's a thing you're doing on top of your regular job. But as these industries have evolved into larger, multi-billion-dollar industries at this point, and that's not an exaggeration when you look at tabletop as a whole, particularly now that it's branching into movies and TV and everything else, video games. From the beginning, I insisted on a degree of, at least that people were considering professionalism when they were talking to people about working in the industry. So I caught a lot of heat early on for saying, hey, people who are working 35 hours doing streaming for tabletop shows should be getting paid for those shows when someone else is making money off of it. Like, that's a thing that should be happening. So I think that was something early on where I was taking experience from another industry because I had seen what happens when you don't set that up early in an industry. Like, I've seen what happened in unscripted television where, 20 years down the line, folks were going, hey, I don't have healthcare, I don't have retirement. And had we set that up in the beginning, it would be a very different story. We're making a third or a quarter of what our, scripted counterparts are making. Those were things that always were on my mind because I had seen so many friends working in creative industries have to leave those industries and have to compromise on pursuing their creativity because there wasn't professional support. And so to this day, one of the things that has been a priority for me is trying to teach people how to be a professional in this industry and how to be from the production side, from the creator side, when you are working with people, how to be professional in that as well.
Well, and I think, as you've pointed out in conversation, you and I, as well as in your own live streams on Twitch, one of the other challenges, of course, is that's assuming the playing field is equal for everybody. And the truth is, those with disabilities, whether they're obvious physical disabilities or they're neurodivergent or, they're non-obvious, and they're, as you experience yourself, even if you can't see it in the surface, if it's a disability that affects your ability to do 16 hours a day, 5 or 6 days in a row, you can't even necessarily assume that everybody's going to be at the same energy play level, and making accommodations for folks is no longer, I think let me take a step back. I think accommodations for folks are starting to be seen less as indulgent. Oh, you need extra, you need an extra break, versus like, actually, we really need this for everybody to work at their best level. And we need to be understanding of the challenges that everybody's coming through. Talk to me a little bit about how you've seen the industry shift in that way, or has it really shifted? And if not, where do we need to go with it?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a long way to go, and that's true in every industry across the board. I don't think there are too many industries that are, fully compliant with the ADA, that are giving actual equity, that you show up and they have sign language interpreters on staff, that they have, flex hours automatically for folks. So often these are things you're needing to request. They're not there by default as offerings by companies. So for me, I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder, and then I have a number of other sort of related conditions, and then I also have ADHD. Um, it means I have chronic pain, I have fatigue, some other fun and exciting things. So yeah, for me, my energy level is inconsistent. My pain levels are inconsistent. That can affect my ability to think, because it's hard as someone who doesn't experience chronic pain to conceptualize what living with chronic pain is like, because when I say I cannot remember the last time I didn't have pain, I mean I cannot remember in my life a day that I woke up and was not in pain. And what pain does is it's like a low level white noise in the background of everything you do, and that's a normal day. And on days when it's worse, it's even more of a focus pull. So just by kind of talking about my experience, but coming in and showing the work I do, and the way I can operate, the type of product I can produce when I have that flexibility, when I have the so much of tabletop, I think too, I'm gonna tangent here, the ADHD is gonna be a thing. So much of tabletop is a collaborative medium, and that means that on any day, if you're a performer, this is the same in theater, but in tabletop especially, where you don't have a script and you don't have blocking, and it's just, you don't have that prepared, it's all on the fly. You learn how to modulate as a cast. So you come in before a show and you sort of check in with everyone, and hey, I've had a really rough day. And this is whether or not you have disabilities, whether or not you're neurodivergent, whether or not you are dealing with life stuff, whether or not you're moving, like just the best practice of doing a show. The same way in theater, you go into a group warm up to kind of get in touch with everyone and see where everyone's energy is and where you can, push and pull and boost people up, or need to take some of the weight that day. That's kind of how, especially on the professional level, most of us operate. We've learned that you get better shows when you can come in and say, hey, I've had a really rough day, I'm really tired. If someone else can sort of take the heft of the story today, that would be awesome. Or hey, I'm feeling great. Yeah, I'm happy to dive into stuff today. Even things, something happens in the news and someone's like, hey, I'm not really wanting to, can we not do that thing today? Can we avoid this topic today? Can we not make these jokes today? And that connection, I think, as a baseline, is key to success when you're trying to tell these stories. Because there also is a huge difference between a live streamed show or an actual play show and a home game. They're two very different experiences. If you stream your home game, it's incredibly boring to watch as an audience. If you're there in your pajamas with pizza playing for 6 hours or 8 hours, and just taking all of your breaks and tangents and inside jokes, unless the audience is in on those things, it's not a fun watch. So when you do an actual play, for me, and what I think often differentiates the people who are successful in that field, has to do a lot with understanding that this is a performance. You want to reward an audience for tuning in and for giving you their time, because at this point there are a million other actual plays at any given moment to watch. So you want them to be part of that story, be excited about that story, be invested in it. And you need to give a performance for them. There is a degree of performance, and you might veer into different types of things. You might cast differently. It might be a very different group than you might have at your home game. You might explore different topics or not explore topics. So that I think is another differentiation. All of this is to say there is already a baseline adjustment that happens. And I think as more and more disabled people have disclosed and started talking more openly about their experience, first of all, we've realized a lot of neurodivergent people are drawn to tabletop games, and a lot of physically disabled people are also drawn to tabletop games. Excuse me, because you can sit at a table, you can lie down while you're doing it, you can. There are a lot of things in terms of the imagination of it, of the number crunching, of the everyone can find their thing that they can hyper focus on. There are just a lot of reasons that this is a game that's particularly appealing to disabled players. I think that as companies started to recognize that, as audiences started to recognize that, as players started to recognize that, as consumers started to recognize that, the tone of the industry has shifted to be more inclusive of that. Because, I mean, on a purely capitalistic level, there's a lot of money available when you're creating something that is more inclusive of audiences. Disabled audiences have, I believe the most recent number was $496 billion in disabled trying this again. That the disabled community has $496 billion in disposable income. So from a purely capitalistic perspective, there's a lot of money to be made, and disabled audiences and consumers tend to be incredibly brand loyal. So
Yeah.
it's a smart business decision on top of being ethically the right thing to do to be an inclusive product.
Yeah. Well, and I think you bring up an interesting point too, which is that, you know, the driver is ultimately always going to be how much more revenue can we squeeze out. And I think a lot of industries, not just certainly limited to entertainment, but broadly, have recognized that by being more inclusive of disabled folks, there's not just more money, but there's also more opportunities for efficiencies. There's been, technologies that have been developed because a disabled person expressed a need that they realized had a broader application
Do
to
you
things.
text?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, not to mention too, I mean, visual description of images that is now, prolific on Twitter and other platforms. Alt text. Yep. One thing though that I think is interesting is captioning. Oh, I can't watch TV without captioning anymore. And that's mostly because I really should stop trying to watch television with two other devices in my lap. And maybe that also speaks to some analyses I might need to do about my life. One thing though that I'm interested in is your thoughts on sort of how some of these trends are being expressed within the stories themselves. So if you're watching Dimension 20, if you're watching Critical Role, Children of Verite, and lots of the other streaming games that we see now, you're starting to see a lot more representation of disability, of folks who are transgender within these gaming environments. Do you think that that's having a positive effect on the storytelling itself?
Oh, absolutely. I think we're telling such interesting stories now that in the past weren't things that you could necessarily explore. I know a lot of trans folks who found the beginning of their gender exploration because they started playing games and, playing characters of a different gender and going, oh, this actually, and looking back, they go, there was a reason. There was a reason you always played that kind of character. When you allow people to experience ideas around imagination and give people opportunities to imagine worlds that are different, maybe better in some ways than our own, more accessible, more inclusive, people get more comfortable with those ideas. So specifically though, Dimension 20 was the first place I ever did an interview where I asked about captioning, and they said, oh yeah, we have every episode professionally captioned, because normally I'm like, here are resources for how you can caption your stuff. Here are places you can send it to get it captioned, blah, 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 blah. And they were like, oh no, we've got it. As a consequence of that, I have friends who are deaf who got into tabletop games because those were captioned games and shows. Children of Erte, we have 2 openly disabled cast members. We have I play a disabled character in the show. And that's certainly not a focus of the character. It's just it's one other piece of who they are. we did a show called Gale Song, which we worked on for 2 years to get made through D&D and D&D Beyond. Last December it came out. It was an all disabled cast, playing almost all, most, maybe all. Some people weren't specific about it, but disabled characters. But the story isn't about that. But we created cool devices and found ways to express that in the world. And people watching went, "Oh, I never even thought of doing that. I never even imagined that you could have a world like that or use tools like that."
Well, and I think too, one of the important points there to pull out is the idea that just because you make a story with characters who have disabilities, and I think it's important, by the way, as you and I have discussed, phrasing it as characters with disabilities, not disabled characters, because that's an important visual. Excuse me, that's an important.
Wrong.
No,
the opposite
I got it backwards.
Way. Yeah, disabled characters.
For years, I was told it was the other direction. This is
for years people did say it the other way, but the thing about that was it was non-disabled people who went. So it's called identity first versus person first. Person first is a person with a disability.
Educate me.
Yeah, and so person first language is where you say it's a person with a disability. The disabled community in general, if you look at sort of people who do have an emphasis on disability studies, do disabled activism, things like that, the preference generally is identity first, because it's not something we can like go leave at home when we go to the store. It's not something that can be divested. It's everything down to how I hold like a soda can. For me, my disability affects all of those things. Person first was primarily it was advocated for a lot in like starting in the 80s and 90s, because it was like, let's see the person. And I go, no, I should be seen as a person by default. Thank you very much. Right. Like, I don't need to make you see me as a person. The people now who tend to advocate, and this is not universal, disability is not a monolith. Our community has very different feelings about this, but a lot of the folks I work with and a lot of the literature and the folks doing academic work on this prefer identity first. But person first now is often advocated for by non-disabled people as a way to, like, it's very othering. It's a weird grammatical gymnastic thing. And, you know, the autistic community is the same way. Yeah. So, I mean, they both can be used as long as you're not using something like handicapped, or there are terms that are really like really no one's going to get mad at you for that, but that tends to be the preference.
Well, but I think it's important. I mean, I have a point I want to get back to in a minute, but this is a more important one, I think, actually, because it's not about how I want to express. It's about how the person I'm referring to wants to be expressed about and towards.
Yeah.
So thank you for
ideally,
educating me.
the best way to do it, like any identity that you're discussing, is ask the person about their individual preferences, because people do have different preferences, and different communities. I would say one of the exceptions to this is often the intellectually disabled community. The ID community frequently will request person first language instead. That's very much unique. Yeah. It's complicated.
Thank you for the education. No, it is, and I think the interesting thing that I not only am learning in this moment, of course, but also was trying to make a point of, was that it's less about making stories about disabilities and instead being about, you know, disabled people being in the story. And it's not making the focus of the story their disabilities so much as, oh, we need a magically enchanted wheelchair. Great. That's a thing we've got now. Now we're doing the story. And it's not trying to, you pointed to the 80s and 90s, where I remember a time where every story about somebody who had any kind of disability, it was this like hero's tale of how they were overcoming this incredible thing and how brave they were and how wonderful it was to see them. I foolish, but what's the term you want to tell me?
Inspiration porn. A term coined by Stella Young to describe those stories of that are objectifying disabled people so that non-disabled people can look at it and make themselves feel better. It's for the personal enjoyment and gratification of non-disabled people. Inspiration porn. And unfortunately, it's still extremely prevalent. There are about 7 different stereotypes that are very prevalent in media about disability, and it's tough because those are, in a world that is dealing with COVID and long COVID and a mass disabling event, having those stigmas has done such deep harm to people who are having to adjust to acquired disabilities, and made people feel so ashamed and fearful of things like using a wheelchair. For me, getting my wheelchair was the greatest thing ever. Like, I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user. I call myself the riddle of the Sphinx because I'm on 2 legs, 3 legs, or wheels, depending on the day. And when I got my wheels, I mean, I don't remember if you were still going to cons with me when I started having trouble walking at cons, but a few years
Yeah.
in there,
That happened at our very first con.
Was it already happening in 2009?
I remember when you and I went to our very first San Diego Comic-Con in 2009, and we were waiting on the platform to go back to the hotel at the tram in the Gaslamp.
Right.
And you were exhausted. We'd only been out for 2 hours. You needed to go back for a break. And you also experienced probably one of the first instances you've ever, at the time, it seemed surprising to you, but like, we were outside for maybe 10 minutes and your body overreacted. You developed, a really strong, response, your pain response. Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember that part. I remember that I got sunburned walking from the tram.
Totally. But I remember you had a, I should stop pointing. That's so rude. I apologize.
No, you're fine.
Here, I'll do it this way. No,
it means you in sign language. You're fine.
Perfect. I recall your experiencing a sort of a distributed pain that at the time we attributed to bad night's sleep on the hotel bed or something like that. But I remember very specifically that it was this like cavalcade of things that hit all at once, and we needed to give you some space to like recover.
Okay. Yeah. No. So I guess it was starting earlier than I even remember it starting. I mean, I remember as a kid like having trouble at Disneyland and stuff, but but cons were the thing that pushed me over the edge with the chair. And I remember the first time I raised it to someone close to me, like the possibility of getting a wheelchair, the response was horrified, like absolutely horrified. That the idea of a wheelchair, of me using a wheelchair, was so frightening to that person. And they were saying, well, what if someone from work sees you using it? I'm like, and I was going, well, at least I'm on the convention floor. Like which by that point, like I was starting to dread that part of conventions because, you walk miles and miles and miles and miles at the larger conventions. And so the first time I used a chair was doing a Comic-Con, and it was the greatest thing. Like, and I think that's one of the big discrepancies with like the disabled community and the non-disabled community, where someone will say, I got a chair, I got a new cane. And the disabled community is like, yes, that's the greatest thing. I'm so happy for you. And the non-disabled community is like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, you poor thing. Like, and there's this pity. And the reality is, no, it's independence, it's freedom. They're great. It's like, and putting on a pair of glasses is using an assistive device, and we don't recognize that because it's been very normalized. Mobility devices should be the same thing. There are so many things that should be normalized because all it's doing is a thing that's making it possible for people to live the lives they want to be living. So I think also one of the things that happens in fantasy that I've noticed, I wrote the first ever official accessible adventure for D&D. And it was in a hardcover, and I got a month and a half straight of internet harassment for writing it because people said, oh, you wouldn't, they would magically fix you. First of all, we're not broken. Like, period, end of story. We're not broken. Don't need to be fixed. Have certain things that might need some help in terms of pain management or whatever. Not broken. Nothing broke. I do a whole lot of really cool stuff that I'm super proud of and that a lot of people think is cool. First of all, there was stuff in the DMG already about dungeons that had ramps. Secondly, they go back to ancient China. There are wheelchairs on ancient Greek pottery. Like, this is not new stuff. This is not stuff that couldn't exist in an adventuring world. And yeah, certain adventurers might not choose certain types of adventuring paths for their lives, but also you can use magic, you can use non-magic, you can, like, there's so many possibilities that you have when you're inventing these worlds. You can normalize ramps as much as stairs. That can just be the default. For me, when I build worlds, my cities all have ramps. That's just part of the architecture of the cities I build, because we can have conflict over other stuff, but real world ableism doesn't have to trickle into it. And I think that's one of the big changes that we've seen in recent work from different publishers and different game systems around all of these marginalizations, is because we are actually getting to write them. You're having BIPOC authors writing. Pathfinder just yesterday announced that they're doing an entire adventure path almost entirely authored by Asian authors. It's so exciting. And they have, I want to say, 30 or 40 authors on those books, and they look phenomenal. When you get own voices creating these worlds instead of getting books that are stereotypes and things that we are afraid of because of bullshit. Can we swear on this? Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with it. Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, because of bullshit. Because of inaccurate, inauthentic, usually people who have little to no contact with the reality of the history and lived experiences of those communities, writing about them. When you get people actually from those communities creating these stories, the depth of those stories, the perspectives, the way we tell those stories, even the structure of stories changes, and it opens up so much possibility. So yeah. I love it. I think that I feel like my mind has expanded so much because of the Own Voices work that's happened in tabletop, and all of the authors who are being given access to write these books that never had before. It's changed what the texture of them is, and what the goals are, and what the focus of the adventures are, and the characters you meet. You know, there are disabled staff members on staff full time. Like, some of the lead designers, not lead designers. Some of the designers on the D&D team are openly disabled, autistic, queer, BIPOC, like, just so many different folks and so many different perspectives, as opposed to, you go back 15, 20 years, it was all cishet white men, you know, straight white men. And
you can say it, dudes who look like me. It's okay. Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with dudes who look like you. Like, I believe that this is about bringing more seats to the table, not taking people away from that. But I think there has to be equal opportunities for voices to bring things in, and also say, hey, that's not cool. Or, hey, could we try it this way instead? Or, hey, I have this really cool idea because, you know, in my cultural background, there's this really interesting piece of mythology that I think might make a really cool twist on this thing.
I couldn't agree with you more. I joke about guys who look like me just because, you know, as somebody who looks like a conventional white guy, I'm an easy target. But the truth is, you're preaching to the choir on that one. I think opening the table rather than replacing the seats is exactly the right way to think about it. And
I feel like I went into like lecture mode, not conversation. I'm sorry.
Nah, don't worry about it. It's fine. This happens. Let me tell you, this happens on this more than you think. One question I do have, though, is about the popularity of D&D from your perspective. So there are lots of other systems out there. There's lots of other tabletop games. D&D, you know, granted, certainly was early, but why do you think it's lasted as long as it has in terms of both its popularity and now its cultural, I don't want to say value, but its cultural proliferation?
Yeah. I think there are a few factors that go into it. The first piece is collaborative storytelling, because right off the bat, everyone who's at that table is invested because they've brought their own stuff to it. They're a part of it and can point to the story and go, hey, that was mine. So you immediately get this emotional investment, and you're getting connection. You're getting time with people, at a table, whether that's a virtual table, whether it's a play by text, whatever it is. You're getting that connection with other people, and you're working together to, as a team, solve problems. That's not something you get in the same way in video games. In video games, there are always walls. And one of my favorite moments is always watching players who have only previously played video games discover that they can push the walls over in D&D, and then they start running around and like pushing over all the walls, and they go, wait, there's no, like, I could do anything. You're going, yeah, because you have a human person responding to your choices. The second, I think, is even when you're playing on a digital platform, in a lot of ways, it's an analog game in a digital world, and it's a break from where you're not interacting in real time with another person. This is a real time, usually there is play by text, but real time being in the same imaginatory and sometimes physical space as other humans and having that connection. Third is the internet, social media, podcasts, and streams like Critical Role. Obviously, that was a game changer. Critical Role changed everything. It was lightning in a bottle. I don't think anyone will ever reproduce the things they have done. I'm sure there will be other projects that become phenomenons in this industry. I think people are starting to really play in new creative ways with the medium, and explore possibilities. Obviously, we're getting, studios interested now, but also the pandemic. I mean, when people didn't have anywhere to go, being able to do something with your friends that's collaborative, that's not just sitting there and watching a movie that's out of sync and you're hearing into different things, especially if you're neurodivergent, that's the worst. An out of sync movie is terrible. But you're getting to spend time, and you feel like you're achieving something, and it's exciting, and you can make it your own. You don't have to follow. There are rules, but if you read the introduction, the first thing they say is use what you want, throw out the rest, make your own for what you want to create. I think it's a medium that is so flexible. It's being used therapeutically, it's being used narratively, it's being used as for me, it's an art form, to build worlds and tell stories, and it can be serious and dramatic, and you end up with everybody at the table crying. You can play games like 10 Candles that will break your heart in the best way. You can play games like Alice is Missing, that's similar but is designed for internet use. You can play traditional D&D, which can also do those things. There's stuff that's super silly. There's stuff that's super weird. I mean, the creativity of the options you have when you start digging in on tabletop games, especially once you start getting into the weirder indies. So that also, I think, contributes to it. If you want to play a really number crunchy game, that exists for you. If you want to play a game that has almost no rules, that also exists. If you want to perform for people and be an actor and get teased for being a theater kid still, because there's a whole subset that's...
I'm sorry, is that not... Did you just describe my day? Because that feels like my day.
Well, yeah. What? Are we still getting...
Shocking. I mean, when you spend as much time as I do talking at people and just trying to get their attention, you get reminded of your theater roots frequently.
No, one of the projects I'm working on right now is just... I went, fine, you want to joke about how all of the tabletop kids are theater kids at heart. I'm going to just dig in as hard as I can on that. And so I'm creating a game, and I'm making my own system for it, and we're going to do a stream of it, and it is as theater kid as you can theater kid, and hopefully teaching some of the history of theater alongside it. We'll see.
That might you need somebody to play test. You give me a call.
You're in. Yeah, but I mean, there's just, it's such a dynamic medium to tell stories. And it lets people surprise both the people that know them well and themselves. You learn stuff about yourself as you play. There are things I go, oh, how would my character respond to this? Because they would be much cooler about this than I am. I'm going to just like try and tap into that a little bit. You recognize themes in your characters and you go, oh, that's a thing I do. Apparently that's some sort of, maybe that's something I should think about.
That's one of the things I do love, though, that when you recognize those things in the games that you play, it gives you something to tell your therapist about. And the last thing you want is for your therapist to be bored.
And then you have therapists who play D&D and like,
right.
You go, oh, I worry when I roll dice with you what you're coming up with. But to be completely fair, like there were some incredible therapists working in tabletop. There's an organization called Take This that is all about mental health for gamers. There's an organization called Jasper's Game Day that does suicide prevention. There are, one of my favorite things is the ways that this hobby has learned to channel itself for good. I mean, I honestly don't know how much like people I know and I have raised in various charity events over the last, however many years I've been doing this, but it's been,
love that.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things is to do games for charity, because you're using this wonderful thing and then you're also getting to actually impact the world by being silly and rolling dice with friends. It's an amazing thing to get to do as part of my job.
I love that. I have one last question that's D&D related, which is that if somebody is listening now and is interested in getting started, what would you point them towards as a resource for learning and setting up their first game?
D&D Beyond has the free rules to start with. And that's all you really need to learn the game, to learn how to play. Whenever you watch streams, each table kind of has chosen what works best. And a lot of what you see on stream is usually things that are leaning towards, again, that show medium. There are a lot of videos that are focused more on learning to play. I would go to those maybe, but I would start with the basic rules. They're free, they're relatively easy to learn, and if you're liking what you're doing, then you can expand to the core books, and then go out from there. And now there are, I don't know how many books, expansions on different options for classes and whatnot. Lots of different choices, but yeah, start with what's free, dip your toe in, see if you like it, and if it's good, then you can always build on that.
We're going to now turn to a new addition to this lovely podcast that I am tentatively titling Ask Me Anything, because I feel like I spend so much time making you talk. Is there anything you've always wanted to ask me? It's going to be one question, it could be many questions. I open the door to you. Take it away if you have anything. And if not, that's okay too.
I don't even know.
I should have given you a warning. I'm springing this on you right now.
This is you're incredibly insightful as a human. You always have been. You just pick stuff up.
That can't be true, but thank you.
Come on. Yeah, I get to ask the questions here now. you handed over the reins.
You're right. You're right. My bad.
But, and you also, I think, acclimate very quickly to groups, and you are able to, like, you're always funny. You always find the ways to spin things, but you get tone right with different people and different groups. Because we've been in all sorts of different settings with folks, and whether that was like the Stan Lee event or random people at a bar at Comic-Con or whatever. So I've seen you in the professional mode and in the casual mode, and across the board, you kind of don't have you don't have to be on in the way that a lot of, this is a very rambling question. But
this is tremendously complimentary. I'm just like, this is Ask Me Anything. It's turned into like, compliment me anything. I love it.
No, but it's true. And I'm curious where you think that comes from and how you think you developed that skill set, because it's not something that I think is incredibly common. And some of it may be innate because that's just a thing some of us have.
Uh, First of all, thank you. All of that was very complimentary. No, that was very lovely. Thank you. Um, where do I think I got all of that? I think some of it is I come from a family of people who like to perform. I think that's certainly part of it. The other, my therapist would tell you that some of that is probably being the child of divorced parents and having to, bounce back and forth between homes with different sensibilities and different senses of decorum. And a lot of it too is I think I've always desired to be the person that somebody can come to and just feel comfortable with. I think that there's a part of me that really feels strongly that there should be a safe space for people like that in my life. And if I can be that safe space, I'd like to do that. As it pertains to professional and situations you and I have been, I mean, as you said, you and I have been to, we went to a premiere of a documentary about Stan Lee. We've partied with actors who are now on various Star Trek spinoff shows. And I'm still upset about that because I didn't get a phone call getting invited to premieres from any of them. I don't
I
think we're
didn't
really
either.
that close anymore. It's really okay. Yeah, no, it's okay. But more than that, I often try not to be the person who's asking for the favor that a lot of people do in those situations. And I try really hard, as I think you do too, to be the person who is there feeling, observing, being part of it as best I can, and knowing that my place in those moments is not to draw attention to what I want. But as you're talking about with D&D, and I think going back to theater and improv, I want to serve the larger conversation. I want to serve those around me in those moments and not necessarily try to draw it to myself. More often than not, when I do, I end up, I remember we had an acting teacher in college, Mary Poole, who once called me out for trying to be too funny during a class conversation. And she basically said,
Did she?
Be clever. She did. She said, be clever or don't be clever. Stop trying to be clever and know your place in a moment. And now stop talking. And I was just like, yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Ouch. But also, oh my God.
That was life-changing advice for me because I recognize that in larger conversations that aren't about me, it's not my place to make them about me. There may be opportunities for me to speak up and contribute, but it's about contributing, not about pulling away. And I think in those moments, I've always worked really hard, and I've seen this as evidenced in your work, not just in your work in D&D, but largely in the course of your career, that you really work hard to invite people in. You work hard to make them feel comfortable. You make it as accessible as possible to as many different people from as many different perspectives. And my version of that has always been on a much smaller scale, I think, to just try to get people to feel in conversation with me as not necessarily relaxed, but as candid as they feel they can be in a given moment. That
all makes perfect sense.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
No, it's true. It's always something I've really admired about you and really respected about you because, I know a lot of people who I grew up in Hollywood and I continue to know a lot of people in that industry and work in that industry. And whenever there was like an event that was where I knew the stakes were high in terms of decorum and things, I always knew that you were a friend I could bring where I could trust you not to make it weird, like,
I appreciate that. You and I have been lucky that we've had some really wonderful experiences at industry events over many years. And I think the one thing I will say is that I've really come to appreciate how you've taken advantage of those opportunities to build not just for yourself, but those around you. And as we sort of come to the end of our conversation, I will say that one of the things I appreciate and admire about you is that you haven't just made that an ethos as part of your career. You've actually made it your career. And I think that more than being the nerdy theater kid who felt uncomfortable amongst the other theater kids who played Dungeons and Dragons back when it wasn't cool. I think one of the things that you've always been on the forefront on, as long as you and I have known each other, is that inclusivity. And so I just want to take a moment and appreciate it and recognize that not only did you just give me a really nice compliment in the form of a question, but that's always been your MO, that you've always tried to see the opportunities that other people have had in terms of the non-obvious qualities they can bring to an event, a conversation, a game, whatever, and to be as inviting of those people as possible, I think is a rare and unique skill. And I just commend you for being able to not only do that in your personal life, but being able to do it professionally as well.
Thank you. That really, really means a lot. We're
just turning this into a love fest. That's how this is going.
You can make me cry. I'm a little in my feelings on that stuff today. But thank you. That really, it means so much to me.
You're very welcome. It's well earned and well deserved.
I was like, I wasn't going to cry in this conversation. Damn it, Nellis.
No, it's too late now. Come on, you know how this works. Before we go and before my voice gives out, as people I'm sure can hear at this point, is there anything in particular you want to call attention to? One of your socials, because you're working on something you want people to know about, or one of the many groups or communities you work with that people should pay attention to?
You can find me on basically all socials as at Dreamwisp, DreamWisp. I stream on Twitch as Dreamwisp Jen. Children of Erte is Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific on twitch.tv/demiplanerpg. If you want to check out something I'm incredibly proud of, you can check out both Gale Song, which is on the D&D Beyond YouTube channel for the VOD, and then also the D&D for All accessible kit that we worked on last year, which is a kit we made a very limited quantity of, and we hope that at some point we can expand that run. That's an incredibly inclusive, accessible kit for disabled gamers. So
Awesome.
those are all big things, but socials is the best way to keep up. I have a bunch of big announcements under the fun and exciting NDA life banner.
Yeah.
That will be announced soon.
Good. Excellent. I will also call out, because you didn't, if anybody here is a member of Dropout, the Sam Reich owned successor to College Humor, Jen has a great conversation with Brennan Lee Mulligan about inclusivity and disabilities in the D&D world. And I absolutely recommend you watch it. It is a great education on how to think about building a more inclusive Dungeons and Dragons game and building more inclusive communities in general.
On that note, I do have on my pinned tweet the accessibility in gaming resource guide, which is a free resource of just a ton of different links, guides, sites, articles, tools that you can use to improve the accessibility of your game, your world building, publishing, event planning, all of that, and that's available for free. So check that out too.
Love it. Who doesn't love free? All right, my friend.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the very lovely question you asked me, and hopefully we'll have you back on again once the NDA lifts and there's more stuff to talk about.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you all for listening. Appreciate it. And if you haven't already, do that like, subscribe, blah, blah, blah thing that we always ask you to do at the end of these things. In the meantime, I've been your host, Jason Nellis. Thanks very much and have a great day.